Okay, in this segment we're going to talk about how we're going to get the engine into the car. We stumbled across two problems that we knew were going to be there, so we'll address them. So on the stop motion, you saw that the engine went in fine. Everything there was no lifting or hurting ourselves. We've got it supported with a beam actually across the engine bay and far too big a strap, so it's not going anywhere. It's not easy to work around it right now either, right? Because with this ratchet strap arrangement, I can lift it up pretty easy, but down is gravity, so I don't particularly like that. We'll have to do some workarounds there, but having the ratchet strap on there does allow me to very easily rotate the engine, and then I can position it. I mean, this is only a rough positioning at this point. I need to find out where the problems are going to be. So the first problem is going to be the oil pan. And I'm going to just, we'll talk you through it. The oil pan's one problem. The second problem is the firewall. Okay, so the firewall currently with the bell housing and everything that's on this engine and where this engine roughly has to sit, it's got way too much tilt. The engine's actually down at about 6.5 degrees. I don't like that. That's not going to be optimal. It's going to cause lots of oil to just be sloshed to the back of the pan. The 5-cylinder engine never came mounted longitudinally, only transversely. So you have to take the 6-cylinder engine oil pan because it was mounted longitudinally as well as transversely. Very odd. Volvo. And you just take one cylinder. It's a modular engine, so you just take as many cylinders out as you like. So I took one cylinder out, I welded the pan back up. Then I'll go over some of these other details, but the pickup for these is of course at the front because we've got an engine driven. Actually, I'll drop you down and show you this. Here, this round part here, it's driven right through the snout of the crankshaft. Okay, so that's giving me actually a crankshaft reference. So I've placed the crankshaft right on there's a hole here right in the middle of the cross member for the radiator support. And that's the center of the car. So we've placed that in the center of the car. There's the pump. The pickup is just below it. I'm going to show you that. I'm just going to carefully, sorry about that, folks, but it ain't Hollywood. Okay, so now if we light this up this way a bit. Okay. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so this little sort of swan necky thing down here, that's basically the clearance for the oil pickup on the 6-cylinder, so it comes down. And the pan's really quite flat through the back, and then you've got this big wide area that I was just pointing to that you can't see, so that's at the back of the pan. But I was always fearful that this here part, this little jut down, was going to interfere with the suspension or the steering rack. So I'm just going to tilt you down a little bit more. Maybe we'll come back to the front so that you can see that steering rack part a little better. Okay, so it's currently in green painter's tape, but this is the ram here, the power part of the steering. I think the actual steering rack will clear quite easily, but I don't believe that this part will. I think it'll foul here. So I tilted the rack. I suppose I could tilt it more, but I tilted as much as I dared to tilt it because, of course, this setup works with a ram, and then there's going to be this suspension part. So the clearance is super tight. In essence, I have it as low as I can go. So I can't really get it any lower on the suspension. So there's going to be some clearance issues there. And then just as frightfully, there's going to be clearance issues at the back. So let me switch the light around. Okay, so now we're looking down at the problem. So here's the suspension. This is the lower mount of the lower control arm. This is that outside mount that I put in, and it's of course designed to handle the loads of everything being in double shear. I could have made it, maybe, this is 1.5 inch wide tube. Could have made it out of something lighter. Could Could have done just a single bar. I mean, I could have done lots of things. This is as strong as I could make it, so I'm happy with the design. But, you know, it's sitting there at an angle and pan's right in the way. So this pan is going to need to be cut all the way down through here, right? We're going to need to lose that side. That's the worst of it. It'll probably cost me about $1 liter. I got an oil cooler going in this car, so it won't be a problem. I am running this engine with the tilt, and I don't have to. Let me just move that out of the way. But on this side with the tilt, you can see, you know, for some reason, Volvo flared this pan out, you know, from the bell housing mount here. So my fear is that as this rotates up, as the frame rotates up, I'm going to get very close to this point here. So, and it's quite thin here. The pan's reasonably thin in cross section. I don't see any reason why, if I'm doing the one side, I don't trim the other side. Just give it a little haircut here. Make sure I've got lots of room, lots of clearance to get that done. Now, this is just my mock-up pan. So I've got, you know, everybody on the forums is all looking for 960 oil pans. Well, back in the day when I asked for 960 oil pans from friends of mine, I started getting 960 oil pans in the mail. So I've got a few, and please don't ask me for them. When everything's done, I still won't sell them. It's always good to have a spare oil pan or two. Here's the actual pan that's going in to the car, so you can see to the front here, to the front side, if I can get the camera up, I've removed the big hump, and I've changed the oil pickup so it's just a straight angle out. It's not going to cause a problem as far as I can ascertain. I hope it won't. I don't really think it will. Then you can see here the back of this pan is rather massive. Here we are here. Now just trying to get a rough dimension on this thing. You know, estimate it's out here somewhere. It's 18 inches wide from end to end at the widest point. So I've got 12 and a quarter, 12 and 3/8, something like that in between those, in between the rails. So we're going to need to lose quite a bit of that pan. Now, the back of the engine, even here is well, to the end of that boss is 13 and 3/8. So now it's not an unwide engine here at the bottom. The pan base itself, if we just looked here, is 10.5 inches, and the mass of the volume is sitting in here. And I think we can easily get this pan down to probably about 11.5. I got 12 and a quarter, 12 and 3/8 inches between it. If I give myself kind of half an inch on either side, understanding that when this engine comes in and out of the car, it can no longer go out the bottom once that subframe's welded in. It has to come out through the top. So we're hoping, and again, the clearance gets better out, right? The clearance gets tight in because of the shape. So, you know, the shape of the frame rails, can't see myself do this right now, is, well, they're this way, right? Those frame rail parts. So when the engine's coming out of the car, then we're going towards more clearance. When the engine's coming into the car, then we're coming into the tight spots. So, you know, theoretically a half an inch either side probably isn't going to cause a problem. Again, we're using these polyurethane engine mounts, so I don't think once this is on, you know, are you going to get this thing shifting this way or that? No, it's not going anywhere. If anything, these will probably make things too buzzy. But whatever, we'll figure that out. So what I've done to fix this up, or to sight it in, is I've created a little jig where I'm going to level off the pan, right? And there's a little flat back here that I've been using. So I lift that up. I set that over there. Of course, it's not quite level at the moment. I had it set up the other way on my table. So. Oh wait, no, it needed to go higher. Doesn't matter. You get the idea. So set that up. We'll level it out. And that will be, in essence, that'll be that. What we'll do then is cut some lines, probably put my big squares up, establish some lines here where we need to slope things and then, or catch the slope of the engine, right? We don't want to cut parallel to the pan. That doesn't make a lot of sense. We want to cut parallel to how the engine is sitting. Now it sits at about 12 degrees. So I've checked the Internet of Truth and it says in one or two places 11 degrees, but there's no way it's 11 degrees, it's 12 degrees. So it is what it is, folks. Anyway, so we've got that all ready to go, and we'll get that cut. Has been a real problem. So I've gone back and forth with it. I can't even tell you how many times. Many times. The issue, of course, is the steering rack, right? So we haven't designed the car to sort of optimally locate the engine. We designed the car to optimally make use of suspension components. So that went and put that steering rack kind of up into the oil pan area, and of course we've got a big, there's a big area in here where that would be good, but it's still higher than I would like. The engine's sitting up a little higher than I would like. There's no chance of getting this engine back to a sort of stock level. We're probably, we're a couple of inches, probably 3 inches or so higher in terms of the crankshaft center line, but because of the changes that I'm making to the firewall, we are able to shift it back significantly. So you're giving and getting, right, in every single step of the way with any one of these projects. So you can't get this thing perfect. If you use the stock suspension, the engine can go lower. It can go very much lower, probably in a more or less stock location. But then you have to deal with relatively crummy suspension geometry that's not reparable. You can't fix it up with what you've got. So these are the compromises that you're going to make in any engineering kind of project. So one of my biggest problems was up here. This is the oil filter return. I have a nice right angle adapter for it. I wanted to make sure that wasn't going to foul on where the steering rack was. I could have continued to move the engine back until it was sitting inside the inside of the car. For heaven's sake, but I decided I didn't cherish that as an idea. So I wanted it back further than stock. It's going to sit probably, in this instance, I'm just looking at it right now, it's about 2 inches further back than a stock engine placement. And with the way the pulleys and things line up on the front, everything will be nice for radiator and intercooler and other things. Going to need a condenser and a few other things out front. And I also need to get this done before the frame gets welded in, because getting the pan in and out
it's just easier to drop the frame, put the pan in and out, get all these fitment issues done before I finally weld all these things up and into the car. All right, so in the last part of the video, which you would have just seen, I hope, you will have seen me mapping out a bunch of things, cutting a bunch of things. That worked kind of okay, good enough for this job. But what I found were a couple of other tight spots. So once I got the pan cut out, so on the driver's side here, you can see I've notched a big hole in it. On the passenger side, I've just lopped the whole corner of it off. In fact, here's the corner that I took off. There's the part. Well, I guess it went that way. That used to go on here. Okay, so I've just simply lopped it off, mostly because it was the wrong shape, right? The shape is all not right. So this outer piece here is just enough to hit. I mean, I could have just trimmed the edge off here in order to get it to fit, but then I'm sort of giving up volume in the back corner, and I thought, well, I want more volume here. I'm losing volume there, so I don't mind if I kind of do kind of like a pie cut almost, right? Just kind of take the pan out to there, and then get that to work that way. So anyway, so that part's sitting over there waiting for brilliant ideas. This piece here, you can see we've got some tape on it just to indicate. Originally I'd sort of come in and I made a right angle turn. This started to feel too tight. Just, I can't tell you. I mean, if you're building stuff like this, you know what I'm talking about. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't build stuff like this. Sometimes a radius or a turn just, I mean, I can get that to move out of the 3/16 aluminum plate that I have. It just feels a bit too tight. So I'd like to extend this off a little bit, and against the suspension member that's here, I'm not going to lose a ton if I just kind of take another little notch out of it here. So I'm going to do that just to make my life a little easier, to make getting this in and out of the car a little easier. And then the last part that had to come off was up here at the front. So the pan kind of gets big on the one side, just aft of the oil cleaner, oil filter. And anyway, so that element in here simply wasn't working because, again, the steering rack was coming through and I was going to get perilously close to the edge here. I'm already kind of about a 1/4 inch or so over here. Now I can't move this part of the pan. I've already moved this part of the pan. That's where, done this once or twice, that's where the oil pickup is. So I've already modified the oil pickup. So instead of having the big swan neck here, I'm just doing a straight right angle bend. I'm hoping that that's going to be okay. And that, I measured it yesterday, it's as tight as I can get it. So I could drop this part down just a little more, but it's only 3/16 of an inch is all I've got until I have to start modifying the pickup tube. In fact, 3/16 puts me right on the pickup tube. Well, we don't want to be rubbing part on part, so we're going to stick with the clearances that the engineers in Volvo gave us. So I've sanded the weld off of here. I'll make sure I weld it up on the inside. I was going to do that anyways. And then I've lopped this whole corner off. This is where the steering box comes in. So things tend to get a bit big right here, and I just wanted ample clearance. Okay, so enough of that. What are we going to do today? Just use a couple of different techniques to get this done. I haven't 100% decided how I'm going to do this particular thing, but the idea is to take the side and then just boop, put it out. Now I've got, it's almost 2 inches actually to the frame. I'm happy with the way things worked. I left myself lots of room here so that when I'm making the fold, right, when I make the folded part, just sort of, this isn't the folded part, this is just me experimenting. When I make that folded part, I have enough room over here to get a nice weld in. Putting the welds in is really critical with aluminum. We don't want to be welding it any more than we need to. In all seriousness, we have just no desire to piece this together as I can. right? Just to try to keep the structural integrity. I'd also like to not have, you can see how the original part was designed. Sort of get in here a little bit. Okay, so you can see the original part here. We've got some really big radiuses, right? Aluminum doesn't like a really sharp corner. So we're going to try to fabricate this with the big radiuses in mind. This part also, one of the reasons that I'm not pie cutting it, opening it up, squaring it off, and then putting a triangle filler piece in, is it gets narrow. Okay, so it's shrinking this way. I have no need to do that. I can come straight off of this, right? In terms of volume, I can come straight off. I could go down. You'd never get the oil out of it, but you could do whatever I like. But I can keep the maximum volume that I can. We've done all our calculations to get the this piece of 2-inch that I've cut off of the sheet in order to get it bended up to go around the corner. And again, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but you can see what I've done here is taken the original pattern, okay, for the hole in the pan, and then I've extended the lines out because, of course, the pattern includes the radius. All right, so I've extended the line out to exclude the radius, and then I need to go and include the radius back in when I go to do the calculation. So I know these long lengths, I mean, where the intersections are perfect and square. What I need to know is what happens when I start cutting the corner. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos on this. Haven't tried it actually, so we're going to give it a go tonight to make sure we can get this done. So we have a couple of things that we have to do. The first thing is we have to calculate a setback, which essentially accounts for the bend radius and the material thickness. So you add a setback for every time you make a bend, or twice. You know, it's basically for every single line. So you're going to set it back on either side of the line if you've got a bend that goes around, or just once as you're going through. So I've calculated that through at 17.5 millimeters. We have 5 millimeter material, and we have a 12.5 millimeter bend radius. Then the bend allowance is basically a computation which allows me to compute what I'm going to lose on the corner, right? So as I cut the corner with the radius, I'm going to lose some material here, but I want the dimensions to still come out okay. So that bend allowance for this, it's a complex formula, but it basically reduces down to something reasonably simple. Anyways, it gives me 21.135. You then take your setbacks, and you minus those from your long distances, and then you add in the bend allowance. So it's reasonably straightforward. I've probably just explained it as badly as anyone else has on YouTube, so away we go. zoom in here just to show you how it worked. You saw me do it. It's the first time I've ever done it. And, you know, you can see the math. You can see the calculations there. For those of you with kids in school, whine and complain about having to do mathematics. I used to be one of those kids. Look at that. That couldn't be any more right on if you tried. Right on. Now I'm going to have to cut the bottom part, right, and get the get that fold fixed up. But in terms of length, we just proved out this business here. Sheet metal math works good. So terribly happy with that. I almost feel like I'm making progress. Let's not say that too loudly, somebody will hear.